Welcome to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum movie night discussion for February. My name is Eric Wright. I'm the education specialist for the museum. I'm joined tonight by Molly Snow, part of the education team. She's going to be running the PowerPoint. And also Miss Jennifer Carlson, the executive director for the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation. And I would like to thank the foundation for their continued support in providing all this free programming that we get to do, to include movie nights, our trivia nights, our curator conversations, and a whole host of other programs that we offer throughout the pandemic. But we're going to keep these virtual events going on after the pandemic's over with, simply because we really like the reach that we get out of these virtual events. We get to engage a larger audience than we normally would, not only nationally, but internationally as well. And so we just think it's a really great platform for us to deliver our product to everybody out there. So thank you again to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation for their support in providing these free virtual programs for everybody who's showing up tonight and all the other nights that we have our program. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the movie A Soldier's Story from 1984, directed by Norman Jewison. His career spanned 40 years of film and television, and there's probably quite a few movies that you would recognize, particularly from the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s from this director. And then also cinematographer for this film was Russell Boyd, and you might remember him from films such as White Men Can't Jump, one of my favorite films, Master and Commander, and then also Gallipoli too, with Mel Gibson. The screenplay for this movie was Charles Fuller and director Norman Jewison, although the director does not have a writing credits for the movie. And this film was based on Charles Fuller's 1981 play, which was called A Soldier's Play, and the movie's called The Soldier's Story. That was an off-Broadway feature with a all-black cast, and it featured a lot of the people that you see in the film as well, to include Denzel Washington, one of the stars of the film and of the play too. In the movie, we also saw Howard E. Rollins Jr. as Captain Davenport, Adolph Caesar as Sergeant Waters, David Alan Grier, and then, like I said, Denzel Washington as well. And this is not the first time Denzel has featured in our movie night discussions. So it's nice to have him back. This movie was produced and released by Columbia Pictures. It was originally picked up by, briefly get my notes here. It was originally, I've lost the note completely. It was originally picked up by one movie studio. I can't remember which one. They bought the rights to the play with Norman Jewison being on as director. They decided not to go forward with it. It was also shopped around to about 6 other production studios who decided not to take it. It was finally picked up by Columbia Pictures. They produced and released it in September of 1984. It originally had a budget of $6 million, and it grossed in its box office receipts nearly $22 million. So that was a really good boost for Columbia Pictures. They took a chance with this film, and it really paid off for them. It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, did not win any Academy Awards, but it was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor in a Supporting Role for Master Sergeant Waters, Adolph Caesar, and also for Best Writing. And then Golden Globes as well. It was nominated, but did not win any of those either. Still, it received rather good reviews, but there's also a lot of critics out there of the film as well. And of course, like I said, it was based on Charles Fuller's Pulitzer Prize-winning play, and it looks at racism and segregated Army regiment training in the South. And it focuses on the murder of a tough-as-nails sergeant and the Black Army officer who was sent to investigate the murder. Just briefly before we get started, what did everybody think of the movie?
Yeah, I had never heard of it before, and I thought it was very compelling.
Did you? Okay.
I thought it was pretty decent whodunit, but with all the racism aspects too.
Yeah, okay. And I am going to touch on those racism aspects, maybe not in the way that everybody thinks that I will, but we will talk about that as we go through our discussion as well. Chris, how about you? Did you like the movie?
I saw it when it first came out, and I rewatched it, and I thought at the time that it was really well done. I liked Howard Rollins as an actor because he did a terrific job in the movie Ragtime. And so, this was just another example of his craftsmanship.
Yeah, now if I'm not mistaken, he won an Oscar for Ragtime too, didn't he?
That I don't remember.
Okay, well, I hope everybody doesn't start. Well, actually, I'm glad we're on a virtual platform, so you cannot throw things at me. I particularly, I don't want to say I didn't like the film. I just don't think it was all that. And in particular, Chris, I'm sorry, I did not really care for Howard Rollins Jr.'s performance. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
The main character, the captain.
Anybody else want to chime in on what they thought of the movie? March, how about you?
From what I remember of it, and I didn't see it again,
Okay.
I enjoyed it a great deal.
Did you? Good, good. David, how about you? Did you like it?
Unmute.
Yeah, you're muted there, David. There you go.
Yep, unmute. There we go. I also saw it when it first came out, and I was actually in the Army, and I saw it at a theater on post at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and so he was you almost got the sense of being there a little bit, and then I rewatched it again this week, and I enjoyed it just as much as I did previously. Sort of a lot of the background stuff that's going on around the investigation, it did a good job of sort of capturing the rhythms of military life, of life in the Army.
I will agree, it did do that. I'm former Army myself, and so I could totally relate to why you would say that and how you see it that way. It did kind of make me reminisce a little bit about barracks life, and just being in the military in general. So let's get down to some of the questions that I have. I'm taking a chance tonight. I usually show up with about 9 or 10 pages of notes that I barely get through at all. I usually have so much left over. So tonight I took kind of a minimalist approach. I only have about 4 pages of notes here. So hopefully I'm done talking in about 15 minutes. Hopefully we can bump this up to an hour or so, but we'll see. And that really depends on everybody else as well to really contribute to the discussion, which has never been a problem before. Everybody is fantastic in adding their points and adding their opinions and insights into this. So I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight. But the first question I have, and Chris, I'm sorry you didn't get the questions. Did you register like within the past day or two?
This was about a week ago.
No, I've sent the questions out a few times, and the last time I sent them out, I believe was Monday. So maybe, and I know some people did have an issue with opening up the document too. I did have to send just a straight Word sample to them. So if those of you out there did not get the questions or your document did not open up, I do apologize. But the first question I have tonight, why does Master Sergeant Waters, why does he think he's superior to the soldiers under his command? And I don't mean from a rank standpoint or a veteran standpoint. Just why do you think, I guess, as a Black man in charge of a bunch of other Black men, why does he think he's superior to his soldiers?
In my opinion, really just based on I watched it again just the day before yesterday. It's the stuff he's done above and beyond his military career. I mean, obviously he's a master sergeant with over 20 years of service. He fought in the First World War. He has, a chest full of fruit salad on his dress uniform that he wears. So but he talks about, the fact that his father was illiterate, but his father made sure that his children were not. So Waters has done at least some level of self-education. In his mind, he's tried to better himself in above and beyond what he's done in his military community. You know, in the drunken encounter with the two white officers, he admits that he tried listening to classical music. He didn't really like it, but he did it. And so he's done all of that. And I think he thinks that that's helped him get those 6 stripes. And it bothers him that some of the young enlisted men are just going along to get along, doing their time in the Army, playing some ball, playing some guitar, drinking some beer, and that they don't have any more ambition, for lack of a better word, than that. That really bothers him.
Anybody else got a thought on that?
That was
I
well
would
said.
agree.
I'm sorry,
I
Sally?
think, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Sally.
I was going to say, I think he's typical of a lot of Black adults who rise above where they came from. And I think they kind of flaunt that over people who they feel don't give a damn, just don't care about anything.
Okay. I would go back to David's comments. I would agree with most of that, especially when he is going through his drunken scene with the white soldiers, and just the things that he says. It was mentioned as we started this discussion that there are issues of racism throughout this movie, and it was I think one of the things that the movie really wanted to tackle. One of the particular reasons I don't want to say I don't like the movie. I just thought it punched below its weight, I guess.
You have the same criticism Roger Ebert did.
Oh, really?
I did see Ebert's write up on it, and I did agree with just about everything he said. But the issues of racism that I think it tackles, whether it's purposely or not, is not Black on white racism, but more Black on Black racism.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Master Sergeant Waters is coming from. And he says it quite a few times throughout the film, particularly when he's talking to CJ in the jail cell. And he says, there's that quote. There's no place for folks like you in our world anymore, CJ. And he's talking, he's obviously talking to CJ because CJ doesn't have the education. He doesn't have the kind of smarts that Waters thinks, the Black community should have, so that they'll be looked upon, in a respected manner by whites. And he's trying to, I don't know, kind of a personal mission of his to elevate the Black community to a level that he thinks they should be. That brings on a whole host of other issues. But that's kind of how I looked at it from Master Sergeant Waters' viewpoint anyway. There's a few other things that we'll talk about later on that either support that or not support it. But at least that's the tack that I took from it.
I was wondering if I could say something. This is Yvette.
Hey, Yvette.
Hey, one of the things that I realized that we may think it's racism, Black on Black racism, but I grew up in New Mexico and I grew up in a Hispanic family, and there was a lot of inner racism within our own Hispanic community or within the community of color. And I don't think it's taken me a long time to realize that it wasn't necessarily racism, but classism, and in an ongoing dynamic that as a person of color being raised, you have to elevate to a certain standard in order to be accepted within the white community. That then what happens is it creates a sort of oppressive dynamic within your own race. And so I think what they do touch upon on this movie is questioning where you fit in. Like if you're constantly in this area where you're not sure what you are supposed to be, and you have to, they're finding that they have to identify with one or the other, and which sort of creates an infighting amongst themselves rather than solving the issues that they are actually being brought upon them by another race. And so it's what I found was strong about the movie, and because the author was a Black man himself and served himself, that there are some realistic dynamics that maybe aren't necessarily seen by other communities, and things like almost things that are unspoken, like that kind of dynamic between your own race, you don't speak about, because it's just it's a true struggle. And I think they captured that struggle in this, that I don't think that, yeah, I can't put together a full thought on that, but.
No, but you really did elaborate on that though, Yvette. And I like the way that you looked more toward what you said is classism than racism.
Right, I like that.
Although I think it's a little more nuanced than that, and I'm not quite sure what the word would be or how to define it, but I do think that maybe you're onto something there for sure.
I kind of think it's a matter of classism infused by the racism in the society around them, because otherwise he wouldn't have. He wanted to elevate the Black race, but he couldn't do it as long as there were these other people who were like lower class within the Black race. So and that was all a function of the outside community, the outside society, holding Black people back.
Right, there was no way to figure out how to elevate them as well. Right.
Part of it too is one of the things that I didn't realize until last time I watched this film. Sergeant Waters has nowhere else to go in his career. He's given his life to the Army. There's no E9 rank. Today we look at Master Sergeant as E8. There's nowhere else for him to go as an NCO, regardless of his race in terms of promotion. And as a Black NCO, of course, his career prospects he's definitely topped out. And so in some ways, I kind of get the sense his crusade is to try and, address the dynamics that Yvette was talking about. That's one way to interpret what he's trying to do. And it creates, it in some ways ends up creating more friction than he's trying to solve.
Yeah. And he sees possibilities. PFC Peterson, played by Denzel Washington, even though they had the fight, the disagreement after the ball game, Waters actually respected that because Peterson stood up for himself and his fellow platoon mates. And it was revealed in the investigation that Waters planned to promote Peterson. And, the young corporal who was the Jeep driver, who was assigned as Captain Davenport's driver. And Waters is frustrated that more of these men like CJ, aren't like Peterson and the corporal who was the driver. I can't remember the character's name. Robert Townsend is the actor. And so it's that frustration in Waters that keeps bubbling up in the flashbacks we have of him.
I agree. I think it's also like he truly believes in the military, like that the sort of uniformity of military, that your color is green or blue or red or whoever you're serving. And so that sort of optimistic point of view of being in the military that brings that the structure and policy creates the equality, right? Like if you follow the rules, you move forward. And he's frustrated that, like Chris says, he can't move any further, but he's trying to show that you're still in the Army, so you have to follow military regiment and
get with the program. Right.
And
CJ won't get with the program. A couple of the other, Wilkie won't get with the program. And that just drives Waters crazy.
Yeah, and he goes, there's a couple points throughout the movie where he really illustrates that. He even flat out says it. It doesn't matter, and nothing else matters. You're in the military now. You may not like the orders, you may not like, what you're told to do, how you're supposed to do it. That doesn't matter. There's no room for argument. There's no room for, well, maybe this or that. You've been given an order. Your job is to execute. That's it, flat out.
Well, I'm glad that David connected Wilkie and CJ, in the same sentence, because I know I'm getting ahead a little bit, but those were really my two favorite characters because they were just there was a humanity about them, and they didn't want to be soldiers particularly. Wilkie, he wanted to be the ball player, and CJ, I took him as somebody not only who wasn't educated, but somebody who had probably like a learning disability or a developmental disability of some kind. He may have been doing the very best he could under those circumstances. And so I liked them as a counter to the idea of, the regimented soldier type person who really was in it for the purpose of service.
Yeah, and we got to remember that this is, during World War II. We take the military very seriously nowadays, but in World War II, it was to an nth degree of seriousness. Everything was about the war itself. And so it's really hard to relate to something like that for us nowadays. The seriousness and the gravity of everyday life. But you're right, if you're supposed to be dedicated to the military profession, then you're dedicated, and particularly during this time period. And you have soldiers who are not, especially during this time period, I would think, I don't want to say slighted, but you probably are looked upon as maybe a little less than the rest of us. And I think that goes with any unit, whether you're segregated or integrated, you're Black, you're white, you're Hispanic. In time of war, your country needs you, and if you're not on the same script as everybody else, you're going to be, I don't want to say marginalized, but maybe excluded a little bit.
I'd like to say something, please.
Oh, sure.
So,
go ahead.
during the Second World War, my father was a captain, and he was sent down to, I'm going to say either Biloxi, Mississippi, or Birmingham, Alabama, where he was in charge of, I don't know what to call it, a group of Black soldiers. And he patrolled them with the other white officers with a submachine gun and a Jeep at night because of their quote unquote rowdiness. And my father ended up being a very prejudiced man, probably as a result of that experience, because he was from Fargo, North Dakota, and had no experience with Black people before. And I think I have come to the conclusion, not from having talked to him about it, but thinking about the subject, that the reason for their getting rowdy was because they were so angry at the situation in which they found themselves, that they were not treated equally to the white troops, that they were they couldn't go into town, that the segregation of human beings in that area was so vast that I think they had a real right to be absolutely furious. And yeah, I'm sure there were Northern Blacks among them, which made the situation even more volatile. So, if anything, I think this really discounts the extreme situation that they found themselves in.
I don't want to get too off topic, but do you think maybe that you can take those? Somebody's coming through. Okay. Do you think maybe we could take that situation that you were describing, Marge, and apply it to what's going on nowadays?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I would agree as well. There's a lot of reason to foster animosity, and be upset or mad.
Right.
And like you said, your father considered this group rowdy, when in fact they really just are trying to they vocalize themselves in so many different areas that didn't work. Let's just try a new area. And, and then they try that area and everyone's like, oh my God, these people are out of control. I think, yeah, that kind of sentiment would apply to some of the situations that we're seeing today.
Yeah.
Chris, I kind of want to go back to the point you made just a few minutes ago about Master Sergeant Waters having nowhere to go in his career. He's achieved his highest rank. He's not gonna go any further. As he's dying, just before he gets shot, and we see this particularly when he's having the dispute with the white officers. He says a couple times, "They still hate you. They still hate you." Who's he talking to there? Who's the you? They hate you. Who's the who?
I think the you. I kind of took it that the you was him.
Mm.
He was kind of saying, "I tried so hard to ingratiate myself with the white officers and white soldiers in the military and so forth, but they still hate you. They will still hate you no matter what you do."
Mhm.
Was kind of what he was saying. They hate me, and they would hate me too.
I think he's talking about black people, and he's speaking. That's the moment right before he gets shot, and he's talking to Smalls and Peterson, and he's speaking to them directly, but he's talking about black people in general. That white people are still going to hate black people in general, no matter because of all the racism in the society, no matter what older men like him have done. It's still, the mountain is still too high to climb. That's what he's feeling at that moment.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also think that he's expounding on the greater black population, but I think he is talking to himself.
Okay.
He's done all this. He's a veteran of World War I. He's about to go into be a veteran of World War II.
I always took it as his inner monologue. He's drunk,
Right.
and instead of this being an internal conversation, he's vocalizing his inner monologue at this point.
Yeah,
Exactly right, Chris. Yeah, that's the way I took it as well.
yeah. The alcohol has let the words out. Yeah.
And I think it could be read two different ways, if you look at it in a certain light. The first time they show that scene, he's with the white officers. The second time, he's with Peterson and Smalls. And so I think maybe the second time you see it, you could maybe interpret it as, he's talking to Peterson and Smalls. And maybe even particularly Peterson. Peterson doesn't come off as the country bumpkin, so to speak. And it could be maybe interpreted as no matter what you do, they're still going to hate you. But I would agree with Chris that he is vocalizing an internal conversation that he's having with himself.
So can I ask how much progress has been made in the past 70 years? Is it just that we have changed from 60% in favor of and 40% against to 40% against and 60% whatever in terms of racial discrimination? It's pretty much the same thing today, a slight change.
But it isn't institutionalized the way it was then,
Okay.
Or it's less institutional.
Yeah, not in the military.
You muted yourself, David.
My iPad is pretty sensitive.
Oh, my phone's the same way. I'm opening up screens all the time that I don't mean to. But sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I would, the civil rights movement happened, from the Montgomery bus boycott to the acts of 64 and 65, I wouldn't say all, but nearly all of the official structures that allowed it to happen in the 1940s have been torn down. And what exists now is in the hearts and minds of men and women.
I'm not sure I would agree, because I think the criminal justice system is still very biased. The whole system of laws that looks at the crimes of things that are African-American type, you know, the incarceration, etc. The whole system of how people are forced that are incarcerated are going to be tried or forced to pay huge monetary penalties. I think that is reflective that things have not changed within our society as much as they should.
And kind of on your point, Marge, the one of the things that kind of bothered me about the movie was that they kind of set you up for a predetermined outcome. And that predetermined outcome was that Master Sergeant Waters was killed by Klansmen. Do you think that was fair? That they kind of set it up that way? And I don't mean fair from an audience perspective. I just mean fair from a societal perspective.
Yeah, but one of the things they said in the movie was that other soldiers who had wandered off the post did get killed by Klansmen. So, round up the usual suspects is what you may want to call it.
Right, sure. And it was kind of interesting. One of the parts of the movie that I did like is when who was he talking to? I think he was talking. I can't remember who Captain Davenport was interviewing, but they were talking about that this was done by the Klan, and the soldier asked, "Well, did they take his insignia and his rank off his uniform?" And Captain Davenport's like, "No, it was still on there." And he's like, "Well,
that was Wilkie. That was one of his interviews with Wilkie.
Yeah, I thought that was a particularly good scene, and it was a good scene, but at the same time, it really let the cat out of the bag from just a writing viewpoint and how you structure a movie. Once you got to that scene right there, you knew that it wasn't Klan involved. You knew that they were trying to set you up, and the ending was going to be different than what they were trying to propose.
But then they introduced the characters of the two white officers, the ordnance lieutenant and the medical captain. And the audience was, I think the audience was led to believe that those two had done it for probably that middle portion of the movie.
Yeah, and there you go right there, Lieutenant Byrd and Captain Wilcox. Very small roles in the film, but nonetheless important to try to throw the sniff off of who really did this. And I think the scene where they're in the officers club and are at the pool table, when they reveal that none of them had been issued any .45 ammunition, I thought that was kind of telling and important as well.
Oh, sure. That's the, as far as the who done it, that's the key scene in the entire movie.
Uh-huh. That's the maybe the fourth or fifth time that term "who done it" has come out of this. One of the things that I look at this movie is not a who done it, but a why done it. And we could talk about that in a few minutes when we go into the filmmaking process of it. I want to kind of move along a little bit to these next two questions. They're kind of part and parcel to one another. And the question I asked was, do you think Master Sergeant Waters has issues squaring his blackness with his being a soldier? And does he hide behind one or the other of these character traits? And then I also asked the same question about Captain Davenport.
That's a deep question.
It is. And I'll just tell you my thoughts on it right now and give everybody a chance to chew on that a little bit. I'm conflicted, honestly. I don't know that there's a right answer for that. There's so many times throughout the film when I thought Waters was just being a master sergeant. And skin color never factored into his decisions or the things that he was doing. And then there's other times in the film when I thought the exact opposite. There was never a clear cut path for him that showed him going one way or the other. And so
that may be the point, Eric.
It might be. It might have been done on purpose. You're right. But for Captain Davenport, Oh, you know what? I'm not even gonna touch Captain Davenport. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't like that character. I didn't like his acting. Um, I just, I was a little disappointed with Howard Rollins Jr.
He played it just a little too straight. I thought it was a decent character, but I thought he played Captain Davenport just a little too straight.
Yeah, I thought his performance was wooden. It didn't seem, you know, it just didn't seem like a real life character. And one of the things I did in preparing for tonight was I went back and looked at clips of the stage play. And David Alan Grier played Captain Davenport. And I don't know if it was all of the production on stage, but certainly in some of the stage productions, David Alan Grier played Captain Davenport. Or, I'm sorry, not David Alan Grier. What was his name? I have it right here, just a moment. I had it right here, but Blair Underwood, and you might remember him from Law and Order. The way he played it on stage was just so vibrant, and he just had so much emotion to him. But it wasn't like over the top emotion, whereas Howard E. Rollins Jr., really didn't have any emotion at all, hardly. It was really a different set of characters altogether, even though it was the same one. And I realize actors, once that role has already been done, if they're reprising it, they want to kind of make it their own. They want to change it up and make it a little different so they can, like I said, make their own character out of it. But I really don't think Rollins did a very good job of that. Unfortunate.
Well, part of it, they use the sunglasses as a plot device, or I don't know, comic relief or something. But it bothered me that he was always wearing the shades, I mean, because maybe it was because what you said, Eric, you couldn't really see his emotions. You couldn't really see what he was feeling. Maybe they did that on purpose, but it did bug me a little bit that even though they wanted to use that, it was that he was always wearing the shades, and I couldn't get into it, what he was thinking.
I did love the joke he made early in the film where he says, "I like them. They're like General MacArthur's," who was famous for wearing sunglasses in official photographs. I thought that was a very funny line.
Well, and then the white captain at the end of the movie, he's got the sunglasses on.
He's got,
yeah. What were the attitudes displayed toward Captain Davenport once he showed up at the Army base, not only by the white soldiers, but the black soldiers as well? And how do those, and this is kind of a softball question, how do those kind of compare and contrast to the attitudes toward the end of the movie? Do you think that the transition was realistic? Again, I guess another deep question, maybe not such a softball like I thought.
Well, he really was an outsider in terms of coming from another part of the country, and he was highly educated, and those things were, he didn't fit into either the white world or the black world.
Well, and also for anybody who's been in the military, he was a staff lawyer from Washington, D.C. He clearly had that Judge Advocate General's insignia on his uniform, whereas this is a line unit. Prepare, training to go overseas and fight. And I can tell you, and a couple of other guys who are veterans, that, an inspection team or an investigator arrives from the Pentagon. I don't care if they're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, they're looked at with suspicion, because that's what you said. He was an outsider. And so, and then, I think probably some of the lower ranking black soldiers were probably hoping he'd find a couple of Klansmen who'd done it, or a couple of white soldiers who'd done it. And he gets to the truth, and the truth probably hit a little too close to home there at the end. So maybe that transition in attitudes toward him wasn't so accurate. That's kind of a lot there, but who knows?
No, and I think you're right, David. Especially when you mention an outsider perspective. and not just, you know, a lawyer or an IG investigation or anything like that. Anybody, even, you know, a new soldier who comes into a unit and is going to be with that unit for a while, they're still an outsider until, you know, they've completed that certain task or done that certain thing that really, you know, brings them into the unit itself, to the point where everybody else includes them.
Till they get a nickname.
Yeah, even such small things like that. You're absolutely right, Kathy.
And that's also kind of maybe true of a baseball team too, which this in a way was. You know, the guy, the beloved guy gets traded and they bring in a guy. I'm sure that guy has to prove himself on the team for a while before before they forget about the guy they loved.
And as far as his role, this takes us back a couple steps actually, but I thought the plot was very clever in the fact that it did raise a lot of issues of black and white discrimination, but in the end, it was a black person who was guilty. So it was acceptable to more audiences than if they had found that some white guy had committed it. I mean, I thought it was successful as a movie because they raised the issues, but they eventually resolved them in a way that a lot of audiences could accept. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it does. And honestly, I hadn't looked at it that way, but now that you bring that point up, I can definitely see that for sure. We are getting a little bit close on time. I want to ask, do you think once Captain Davenport found out who the real criminals were in this investigation, you think he was disappointed? And that kind of goes to what you just said. But do you think he was disappointed with what he found out?
I'm going to think yes and no. I think it probably upset him that it was a black soldier who killed a black NCO. But I think at least kind of the way he played it, he was pleased with the lawyer in him was pleased with getting to the truth.
Mm-hmm. The whole time,
and that's kind of the difference, isn't it? Is
yeah,
the person and then the professional.
mm-hmm.
And you see, you know, after they take Smalls and Peterson away, and he kind of turns to look out the window, he gets that tear running down his eye. And that's what kind of prompted me to ask that question. I'm sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something? Yeah.
Well, I just said he was all about the truth, so that was important to him, I think. As the lawyer, he was like, you know, well, I did my job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, like David said, you know, he did his job. He found out, you know, who the culprits were. But at the same time, you know, it sucks that it was, you know, somebody of his own race and enlisted members of the military, rather than, you know, some townies or some Klan members or something. So yeah, that is a very good point.
However, I think the important thing is that Sergeant Waters, the death of CJ was the motivating factor for killing Sergeant Waters. So I think that was disappointing for him, that Sergeant Waters instigated the whole thing, and Peterson actually, I think, did I won't say a service, but he exacted revenge for something that should not have happened.
Yeah, and he says at the end of the movie, you know, something to the effect of, you know, I didn't kill anybody who's going to matter.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right. Peterson does take, you know, that viewpoint, that it was revenge, it was justified. He's not very happy he got caught, but I guess no criminal is, right? From a filmmaking point of view, or rather, sorry, I want to go on to the actors and characters. And I've kind of talked about the first question. The first question I asked under the actors and characters section was about Howard E. Rollins Jr. and his character living in two different worlds, you know, being black and also being a military officer. And
being a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. You know, I've got already most of the answers from everybody, but you know, the question that I asked was, do you think that he delivered a performance that was convincing? And mostly everybody has said yes so far. David and I kind of agree that maybe he could have fleshed his character out a little bit more, I think. You know, maybe had done a little bit more with it, but you know, I've never been in a feature motion picture, so I guess he's doing something right, and I'm not one to sit here and criticize him. That's for sure.
I thought a lot of his character was bravado. I mean, because of he's living in all these worlds, he has to put up a front of some sort, and that scene at the end where, you know, as you talk about the tear coming down his cheek, kind of, it's the collapse of all those pressures on him that finally gives rise to that tear that he's been hiding throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, no, actually, go ahead, David.
Well, and there was that scene right before they start the search for Peterson and Smalls, where they've gotten the news they're going to be sent overseas, and there's that impromptu celebration on the post with the shooting of the flare guns and stuff. And and he's in that scene, and you can tell he's enjoying that celebration. That the men are excited, they're going overseas now, and that was the one scene where Rollins, he cracks a big smile on his face, and you can tell he's enjoying the camaraderie there for just a moment, and then he has to go back into his role as investigator.
Yeah, he really doesn't let his guard down too much at all throughout the film, does he?
Yep, no, that was really one of the only times, that and then the tear that you mentioned.
I'm curious, because this was originally a stage play, and I don't know if anybody out there, you know, is, you know, theater buffs as well as movie buffs, but do you think, which platform, which deliverance do you think that this story was better adapted for? Do you think it was better suited for the stage, or do you think it was better suited for film?
I think it would be much more dramatic as a stage play.
I agree with that.
I more tension.
Yeah,
and the claustrophobic, or, you know, the smaller set and stuff, I think might enhance the emotion and the, you know, tension and so forth that the film didn't.
Creative ways to transition in and out of dynamics.
I would agree with that. I would just say that the making of a movie and the fact that they filmed it on an actual Army post, Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, with the assistance of the National Guard, gave it kind of an epic film feeling. But all the interviews that he did, that would have made an excellent presentation on the stage. And like one of you just said a moment ago, it would have given that claustrophobic, walls closing in kind of feeling that the audience would really have gone along with.
It felt a lot like just a stage play being filmed. You know, there were a lot of tight shots. There wasn't a lot of music, you know, like a score that ran underneath it. It just seemed very kind of stripped down as far as a movie.
I think one of the things that made it, I mean, it's one of those, you feel the humidity, you almost smell the dust.
Oh, God.
Yep. You know, I mean, Eric, you're absolutely right. It is, I mean, it captures the life of an Army post. But Yvette is right. I hadn't really thought of it as a stage play before, but it works so well as a movie because you have that level of cinematography and, you know, putting the production together. But as a stage play, letting your mind fill in all those details as you want would create a whole other level of intimacy that would, I could see this just being something else as a stage play.
I think the word intimacy is really good. That you get that in the theater that you don't get on a movie.
Yeah, you're right.
And the stage has to think very creatively in the sense of having two things going on. So when you have all those flashbacks, they have to do it in a creative way where two things are happening simultaneously. So the questioning would be happening on stage left, and then the flashback is happening on stage right. So it actually compresses the two together, which makes it so much more like in the moment.
It's true, because then you
Sorry,
feel them in
I
tandem.
was a professional stagehand, so theater's my. I'm gonna choose theater every time. So
But I tell you, the Sergeant Waters speech in the bar, which for me is one of the more just reach out and grab you speeches.
Yeah.
I could have on the stage, Yvette, would be what you're describing would be just, it'd be just off the charts.
And
Yeah.
then that speech where he goes and visits CJ in jail, and he in
Yeah.
the stockade, and he admits to CJ that he's done this several times in his career, that he's taken,
yeah,
that he's found a young enlisted soldier who he doesn't feel is measuring up, and has set him up in the same way he set up CJ, and has gotten him in the stockade, and has gotten him, convicted at a court martial. That just shows how black his character is. And when I say black, I mean in his heart, is that the character of Sergeant Waters is capable of being. He's been down this road before, and that's really revealing.
Yeah, and I think Adolph Caesar, one of the questions I always ask is, who is your favorite character and why? Adolph Caesar was mine for this movie.
Yeah, far and away, easily.
Such a fantastic job in that role. And that scene you're talking about, David, where he's sitting there talking to CJ in the jail cell, you're right. You could just see his deviousness and that little mustache,
yep,
and that little smirk that he has.
Yep.
And his voice.
Yeah.
Creepy voice.
And he's packing the tobacco in his pipe so nonchalantly while he's doing it. It's like, oh boy, CJ realizes he's doomed then.
Yeah, unfortunately, Adolph Caesar passed well before his time. He could have been an amazing actor. He could have had so many roles. He had another 20 or 30 years of acting in him before he died. And it was, I think from a movie standpoint, from an actor standpoint, that was a loss. He did a really good job in that role. And some of the other movies that he's only in 3 movies, if I'm not mistaken. And he was an amazing actor.
Didn't he have a fairly long career as a stage actor though, prior to that?
Yeah. Not fairly long, but that's how he did get his start. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I guess since we're talking about characters, we'll go around the room. Chris, we'll start with you. Who was your favorite character and why?
Who did you think was a favorite character?
The one they just mentioned.
Caesar or Sergeant
Yeah.
Waters?
Which Chris are you talking to, Eric? You got 2 of us.
I was actually going to start with Chris Wren, but we can start with you, Chris.
No, actually, please start with Chris Wren, because I'm still trying to figure out which one's my favorite. So I'll defer to my namesake.
I thought that Adolph Caesar, his character, was the keystone to this whole movie. Without him, the movie goes nowhere.
Yeah, and he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I really wouldn't consider him a supporting actor in this movie.
So despite your comment that Captain Rollins was wooden, and there's some truth to that, I identified with him as a lawyer, and I just enjoyed his performance throughout.
Well, and you're not alone there. A lot of people did like his performance, and a lot of people felt that he carried the movie through. And there's no right or wrong answers here for sure. So yeah, excellent. David, how about you?
I've already said that I did like very much Adolph Caesar as Sergeant Waters, but it was a fairly small part. I would throw in there Colonel Nevin. Trey Wilson, I believe, was the actor who played Colonel Nevin.
Yep.
He is a fantastic actor. He played Nathan Arizona in Raising Arizona. So he has just great range, and he was just fantastic as the native white Southerner who's a career officer who's made a career of commanding colored troops. I know what I'm doing here. This is how it has to be done. You don't understand. It wasn't a very big part, but he made the most of it. I would say Sergeant Waters was my favorite character, but Colonel Nevin was the second favorite.
Excellent. Sally, how about you?
I watched it purely for Denzel.
Yeah.
and I don't mean to interrupt. That was one of the issues I had as well with this movie was the casting. You had Adolph Caesar just acting his tail off. You had Denzel Washington doing the same thing, and then everybody else looked like the B team in comparison.
Yeah.
I just thought the disparity in casting for this film, in my opinion, it didn't make it a great film. I didn't think Wilkie acted his part very well, and I can't recall his name. David Alan Grier, he's known for his comedy, and here he is in this serious drama. Although this was at the beginning of his career, but still, I just thought that Denzel and Adolph Caesar just were head and shoulders above everybody else as far as their characters and their acting went. Sorry. Carlene, how about you? Who was your favorite character and why?
There's actually two of us, and we voted for Sergeant Major Waters. So as the best actors. But I wanted to bring up a thing about World War II movies.
Sure.
It's an interesting thing because you've got, if you think about at least three, Big Red One, Saving Private Ryan, and this movie. You've got some older guys, but right below them, playing the enlisted men, the draftees, are a bunch of up-and-coming young actors. So if they were to redo this movie again 20 years later, well, 84, so we're talking quite more than 20 years. Who would you pick to play Sergeant Major Waters, Captain Davenport, and that? I'm not that familiar with the up-and-coming black actors, but it would be interesting to see who they would pick to play at least the main roles.
Well, we're at the point now where Denzel could play Sergeant Waters.
Yes.
He'd do a fantastic job.
We've come full circle.
And then his son would play one of the enlisted men.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
I think that's a tougher question than some of the ones I've asked. And then lastly, Kent and Catherine, your favorite actors or your favorite characters and why?
Well, Waters was undoubtedly the best character and probably the best actor. But I have a bit character too that I liked. The white captain, Captain Taylor, Dennis Lipscomb, I think was the actor.
Just West Pointer.
Yeah, the guy who it was all about the baseball aspect of it, and then of course he thought the white guys did it, which formed the irony there, and then at the end, of course, he was when they were shipping out, and he invited him into the Jeep and stuff. It was an interesting character, I thought.
Yeah, there was definitely a difference between the colonel and in the captain, the white colonel and the white captain. Sorry, my dog's jumping on my lap. He wasn't satisfied with his bone all night. There was definitely a difference in approaches, with both of them. That was one of the parts of the movie that I did like, to be honest. Well, we are straight up at 8 o'clock. I still didn't get to all the questions tonight, nor all my notes. But I will commend everybody who participated tonight. You guys really facilitated this discussion. And I think everybody did a great job. Very happy to hear all the opinions and all the just the takes on the movie itself. A couple takes that I hadn't considered before. So it's always nice to be educated, I guess, by other people about what they're thinking, particularly when it comes to issues like those dealt in this movie. And I do want to just thank everybody for the great discussion tonight. Everybody did a bang up job, and I'm just very pleased. So thank you very much to all of you tonight.
What's next? What's next?
Coming up next for March is Platoon. We're going to be looking at that movie in honor of Vietnam Veterans Day, which happens at the end of March. I think we're a couple days amiss from the actual observance versus the night that we're having the movie discussion. But we are looking at Platoon next month. So everybody start watching that. I know it is on Netflix right now. And I'm not quite sure how much longer it's going to be on there. Of course, your local library should have it. And as well, you can rent it on different virtual platforms too. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. And I just want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. As you can see, Molly's put up some of our upcoming events. On Monday, we are going to be looking at the 30th anniversary of Operation Desert Storm. I am a Desert Storm veteran, and it just blows my mind that that was 30 years ago. That makes me feel incredibly old, even though I'm not.
Yeah,
And then
I'm a Desert Storm era veteran. My unit wasn't sent,
Okay.
but I was in at that time as well. Yeah.
Well, and we were talking earlier about the difference between this movie on stage and on film. And somebody mentioned, you know, you could just feel the humidity and the sweat dripping off everybody. David, you said you were at Fort Gordon. I was at Fort Stewart, what Georgia's like in the summertime. And that's exactly how it is.
That's exactly it.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, tonight. And great job on the discussion. And I hope to see everybody back next month.